When we talk about 50,000 people dying in the last 10 years, pedestrians, 13 a day, one every 1 hour and 46 minutes, we're actually talking about human beings that, not just statistics, with their tears ripped away. It has a profound impact not just on the person who was hit, the person in the vehicle involved, but the family as well. And this is a story so tells. In this case, distracted driving was a factor, and there's other factors that contribute to the pedestrian vehicle collisions, both in terms of injuries as well as fatalities. Sometimes it's distracted walking. We can see people walking around all the time with texting, crossing the crosswalk and not paying attention, walking, stepping out in front of cars. Or it could be enthusiastic kids who want to see the neighbor across the street and they were running across the street without stopping to think, to look both ways. We have a very special guest with us today, and I had the honor of spending some time with Jennifer Green and her husband Emil. And they have a personal story. Jennifer lives in Vallejo, and she has agreed to share some of her story with us. And one of the things as you're listening to her story, I want to let you all know that her story only occurred a little less than a year and a half ago. So it's very recent. So Jennifer, you've done an amazing job, and she's the founder of Stop Hard. Please welcome Jennifer Green.
Good morning. My name, as Michelle said, is Jennifer Green, and I won't say I'm happy to be here today, but I'm definitely grateful for the experience to be able to come and talk with you, share with you, and learn more from all of you who are involved in setting policy and making decisions and making things safer for everyone, especially our children. My grandson, Jamari Moore, was killed in on August 17th in 2017. He was riding his bicycle in Sacramento on a road that we never would have wanted him to ride on had we known, but he was 15 years old, and he had only been 15 for 2 weeks. So he and his friend decided to take some shortcuts and ended up on a road that was dangerous by design. He was hit and killed, and the story, much like the story of Forrest that we just watched, and I'm glad, Rochelle, that she sent me that video prior to coming here, because it was just so sad. So I was glad that I got to see it before I came here today. But the difference in my story is that we don't know what the driver was doing at the time that he hit and killed my grandson, because it was a hit and run. So, as bad as things are when there are incidents, as the grandmother in this, or the mother in this film that we just watched, called it an accident, I don't really like to use that term. I call it a crash, because I believe that all of these incidents are preventable. As Rochelle said, either on the part of the driver, the person that's responsible, or even the pedestrian, cyclist, or another driver that's hit. Things can be done to correct this. And so this isn't something, an accident could possibly be a branch falling off of a tree, hitting someone as they're walking in the park, because that might be something that's not preventable. And even in some of those cases, maintenance and things like that can prevent things from happening. So all of these people, the pedestrians and cyclists that are killed by distracted drivers, drunk drivers, people that may be reaching for something that fell on the floor, those are all preventable. I have a few slides that I want to point to as I tell my story. And I know, as has been stated, we all have a lot of statistics, but the real stories are what's going to make a big difference. So I have a couple stories, but here, 6 people are killed by a hit-and-run driver every day in the United States, on average. Hit and run, as I said before, is a heartbreaking epidemic, because not only are you losing a life or someone seriously injured, we don't know what the circumstances were because a lot of these drivers are never caught. The number of fatal hit and runs have reached epidemic proportions in the U.S. More than one hit and run occurs every minute on U.S. roads, and that's according to information released by AAA in their latest traffic safety report. That was 2018. The crashes resulted in 2,049 deaths during the latest reporting period, and sadly, the numbers are trending upward. Here you see 6 people, 6 children. They weren't killed on the same day, but they were all killed in a very close proximity of time by hit-and-run drivers in Northern California, most close to where we are now. So I don't think that there's any other circumstance where we have children, 6 children killed within less than a 6-month period, and it would just be something that is somewhat accepted. I think that there would be quite a great outrage under any other circumstances if children such as these were killed. But these were accidents, so to speak. So California does lead the nation in the number of hit-and-run fatalities. We had more than 300 hit-and-run fatalities during the last reporting period. And even per capita, it's number 7. So we have the greatest number, but even as far as our size and the number of drivers we have, we're still at number 7. So they're just unacceptable numbers. Only Texas and Florida had more than 100. So everybody else is under 100, and we're over 300. Okay, and also, most people that are victims of fatal hit-and-run crashes are either cyclists or pedestrians. And over the past 10 years, nearly 20% of all pedestrian deaths were caused by hit-and-run crashes. And pedestrians and cyclists are obviously the most vulnerable on the road with no protection. So these are some hard stories. And hard, of course, stands for hit-and-run driver. Jade Maldonado, 14, she was killed in a crosswalk while going to school. Jennifer Hahn was killed while jogging on her lunch break. Maribel Gonzalez was also killed while walking. She's not a child, but she was 8 months pregnant and the mother of 6 other children. So her life was taken by a hit-and-run driver that's still at large. Ayers Buffin, she's a young lady that was killed down the street from where I live in Vallejo. She was walking home from school with her backpack, and a car lost control, and she was killed instantly. Dalton Kilpatrick was killed riding his bike home from work one evening in Sacramento, and his hit-and-run driver who killed him is still at large, and his family was recently notified that the case was going to be, I guess it's a cold case now, they could do no further investigation, so his family still doesn't know who's responsible for ending his short life. Lori was killed in Vallejo. She was also riding her bike, 22 and 11 of 2. Deshaun Wilmans, this is an interesting one for me because my grandson, as I said, his hit-and-run driver was arrested 4 days after he was killed, my grandson. So we had a lengthy court process because, the hit-and-run driver and his mother, who was his accomplice, they were fighting the charges and saying they weren't responsible. So we went to court for a year, and that's a whole different story. The driver, actually, even though he was known to have habits of drinking and driving, drug use, had been expelled from school for using drugs. The driver that killed my grandson was 19 years old at the time that it happened, 20 years old when he was sentenced, and received no jail time because he evaded arrest for 4 days, avoided toxicology testing or anything else to show what may have been a factor when he killed my grandson. So it was a really tough time for us, even having lost him, to go through that court process and try to get justice in a case that, no matter what happens, won't bring him back. But to have him walk away with no jail time was pretty devastating for our family. And then just a week later, this young man, who was 14 years old, was killed probably 2 miles away from where my grandson was killed. So it makes you wonder if there's an incentive. I mean, if people see that you can hit someone, whether, you know, even though it's not intentional, and you can run away and possibly get away with it, is this creating a mindset that if something like this happens to me, if I run, I may get away with it? And so this young man, Deshaun Romance, his hit and run driver was caught, and they're going through the process now, but I'm just hoping that the outcome for his family is better than it was for ours. And these are more, these slides, you can kind of move through these, but it's just showing you that hit and run crashes affect people across all color, economic, age barriers. I mean, everybody's affected. In the lower picture, the little boy wasn't killed, but that's his mom. She was a hit and run victim. There's a grandmother on the left. The young boy on the right was training for a marathon, and he was hit while he was training. The young guy on top is actually one of the most recent hit and run victims, and he is a survivor, but he has extensive injuries. It's going to take years and years of rehabilitation to even get him back to close to where he was, and he's 14 years old. Here are others, cyclists. The gentleman in the middle is a San Francisco police officer who was hit and seriously injured by a hit and run driver. He also survived. The others shown were killed. The lady at the bottom left, she's pictured with her granddaughter, but she is the one that was killed. So, and then we have another survivor, lower left here, the young man there. He's 7 years old. He was hit by a driver that still hasn't been detained, and he survived, but he had to have his leg amputated. So that happened within the last month. And then these are families. A couple on the right below, the husband was killed. As Rochelle mentioned, it's not just the immediate family. I mean, or you might think of, you know, the victim's life was cut short, no matter how old they are. Something like this happens, it's tragic, but it's also the people that they leave behind that are, you know, your life is never the same. And here are others. The young lady at the bottom left, she was a San Francisco State student, and she traveled recently to Southern California and was killed. She's 21 years old, and she was killed by another 21-year-old. So that happened within the last couple of weeks. And then, as I told you a little bit about my story, my grandson, Jamari, this was the last photo he took, the last school picture he took. So, you know, he was somewhat vain and probably a little bit excited about getting new pictures. And we actually had that delivered to us the day after he died. The principal brought it to his mother. These are other pictures of him, just showing, as you saw in the film, they're our family members. You know, we have photo albums, pictures, they're our loved ones, and you never expect to outlive your grandchild. And here are other pictures showing, as with Forrest in the film, he was a grandson, a brother. He had a younger brother. His younger brother is now 13 years old. And I actually had to homeschool him for a term after his brother died because he just couldn't go back to school. They didn't go to the same school, but their schools were next to each other. He had a lot of emotional problems. I homeschooled him, and believe me, I'm not a teacher, and I'm not all that patient when it comes to teaching kids, but you do what you have to do. So this just tells you how it affects them. I mean, he has a sister who is now 19. His mother and his sister are pictured with him in the middle. That was his last birthday. There was actually a cake in front of him. They were celebrating his birthday, 15th birthday, 2 weeks before he died. There he is again. And then he was killed. So that's the ghost bite that was placed at the location that he was killed. His memorial, and then his gravestone. So I talked already about sentencing, so, you know, the outcome wasn't as we would have liked. So what this has done, And the reason I really wanted to share stories, not just my story, but to let you see that there are other stories out there, is that the thing that has come out of this is that I have started a foundation called Stop Hard, Stop Hit and Run Drivers. And my mission is obviously to try to stop hit and runs. And by, you wonder, like, how can that happen? Well, first of all, people need to do things like pay more attention to the road. So distracted driving, DUIs, things like that are factors, not just in hit and runs, but in crashes that kill or seriously injure pedestrians, cyclists, and even other drivers. But also to change the mindset and to somehow get people to have a more compassionate response to something like this happening. Because we do live in a society where we are supposed to care about other human beings. We are not, most people that I know, even if they hit an animal, somebody's pet, they're going to stop and maybe try to track it down. Or, I remember being a little girl and being in the car with my dad, and I think he hit a dog, and then he had to stop and see maybe where the dog came from, where he lived, because it's somebody's pet. So, you don't want somebody to just go out and find their pet out on the street, or maybe their pet wanders off because they're hurt really bad. You try to contact somebody. So you would think that people would at least do that for when another human being is involved. So to raise awareness about hit and runs is very important. When I started this, or shortly after my grandson was killed, I talked to a friend of mine that I've known for years, who happened to be at the time and currently is the director of the Office of Traffic Safety. And hit and runs, even pedestrian safety at that time, and as Michelle said, it was only a year and a half ago, it wasn't something that everybody was really talking about or focusing attention on. And we were trying to decide how we could even garner attention and support for, to raise awareness about hit and runs. And shortly thereafter, the AAA safety report came out to show us just how horribly we were doing, especially in the state of California, with regard to hit and runs. I have a Facebook page also. That's Justice for Jamari, and again, we established that page initially to try to make sure that the driver that hit him was prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and that we could really get justice for our family. But very quickly, we learned that this is just a daily occurrence, and we realized how many other families are affected by this. So somehow, as bad as this may seem, and Michelle, when I met with her, she said, God, it's been so recent that this has happened to you. I don't see how you can even talk about it, or you can even go out there and do these things. Well, I had to share with her in the first place, I can have a meeting, or I can give a presentation like this, which incidentally is really the first time that I've given a presentation on this subject. But anytime I'm meeting with somebody or doing work or I have to do research, yeah, I break down and usually maybe have a couple bad days afterwards or whatever. So it's not easy, but I just think it's really important for people to know that we've got to do better. And with you people, the policymakers in this room, you can set policy, you can make changes to roads, and you can do all the things that are very important to keep our kids safe, make things safer for pedestrians, cyclists, especially young people who aren't necessarily going to follow the law. So sometimes we have to, drivers have to watch out for them, or, engineers that are designing streets have to be careful and consider what these kids aren't going to be thinking about, because they're kids. They run and play, they ride the wrong way on the street, they do things like that. But also to maybe just think about how these incidents affect families and loved ones, friends. He has friends who, their lives are forever changed. They're teenagers, and they're not the happy-go-lucky teenagers that they used to be. So, again, my information is here. The website is Stop Hard, and it's also on the material I see. Facebook page, my telephone number. If anybody has any questions, even after today, and they want to talk to me or get more information, I'm definitely available. And I thank you so much for listening to my story.
All right, good job.
So I asked Jennifer just to share a little bit about the specifics of the incident that happened with her grandson. And the reason why is, in this case, it wasn't just a single cause, but it's multiple causes. And how can we begin to address this very important issue, but recognizing all the different ways in which pedestrian and vehicle collisions can occur?
Okay, yes. Well, as I said, my grandson was riding his bike. The hit and run driver, we don't know if they were distracted or if he was under the influence, but we do know that the road that he was on was dangerous by design and not well maintained. So it was a blessing that less than 2 months after he was killed, County Supervisor Serna in Sacramento authorized road improvements. It was a $500,000 road improvement project on the road that he was killed. So they installed, there was a bike lane there before, but it was small and it was not well marked and the street's not well lit. So they installed a bike lane and then they put a 2-foot buffer between the bike lane and the road. They actually had to restripe the road because it was a 10-foot widening, I believe. And so they did things, even though it was too late for my grandson, they did things that made it safer for other kids and pedestrians in that area because it is a, developed area, residential area. And so we're really glad about that. But, you can't help but think, had it been done sooner, it may have saved his life. One of the other factors, and one of the reasons that CHP did a thorough investigation, I was telling the CHP officer in the back of the room, they did an excellent job investigating the accident, the crash. And they came to the conclusion that a tree that had not been maintained was the cause of the accident. So this tree, the branches were really low onto the bike lane. So Jamari could have either, if he rode straight and didn't go out into the street, he would have hit the branches and been knocked out. That wasn't even an option. It's not like he would have been grazed, but it was just blocking the bike lane. So as he went out, as fate would have it, the car was just there at that time. So it is really important, and I appreciate you for asking me to talk about that, Rochelle, because something simple as that, We can say if the person wouldn't have been texting, if the person wouldn't have been reaching for their phone, if the person wouldn't have been drinking, but to know that a road is just not well maintained or that, it's dangerous by design and that causes death or serious injury, that's senseless. So.
I just wanted to, let's give her a warm round of, you're incredibly courageous to be here. About you, but if my grandson died less than a year and a half ago, I don't know that I would have the strength and the courage to stand up here and talk about that issue to make a difference in advocacy. And I think one of the things that's so remarkable is that there's a lot of women, mothers, grandmothers, and individuals, family members, who are the ones that are advocating and championing significant change to make our roads and our world more safe. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here.
Thank you for that.
Another round of applause, please. So we wanted to highlight the human impact of the pedestrian safety, but now we're going to share some information and some data around Solano County specifically. We started very broad with happening in the United States, 50,000, 9,000 in the last 10 years, and then we're talking the human impact of all of this. And now we're going to go into Solano County specifically. And we have the really good fortune of having incredible people on this team. I would like to introduce Josh Pilakowski from DKS Associates and Dr. Matyas, Public Health Officer of Solano County Public Health. So Josh and his agency have worked with STA and the cities to update a county-wide safety plan. And based on this plan, $8.8 million was awarded to fund safety projects countywide. I mean, that's incredible, very exciting. Thank you, Josh, for doing that. And then Dr. Matyas is here to present data about how the collision affect overall health and well-being of residents in our communities and the potential for sustainable solutions that we can all work on as a county. So without further ado, please give them a warm welcome.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Solano County for the last couple of years, and it's really been an honor. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to come here. It's really important. And as Jennifer said, the next step is really up to many of you to make the policy decisions, to move us forward and really make a difference as we go forward with this. So we're going to talk about data, and I know that when I say data, a lot of eyes start to glaze over a little bit. But the important thing to know is that the data really forms the backbone of this entire process from beginning to end. It all starts, the data is what says that Solano County has the second highest rate of pedestrian-involved crashes for people under 15. The data is what says where these crashes are occurring. But then moving forward, the data says, well, why are these crashes occurring? What can we take from this information? And then finally, at the end of it, the data is what says, what benefit can we get from this? Why are we deserving or in need of the funding, which will ultimately lead to these things being implemented and real changes happening?